Racist cop stops elderly black man, then learns. He's America's top judge. The morning sun had barely lifted itself above the sleepy tree line of Ashford, Georgia, when Officer Ryan Cole rolled out of his driveway in his department-issued black and white Charger. It was a quiet town, the kind where trouble didn't come often, and when it did, it usually wore sagging pants or had out-of-state tags. That's what Ryan told himself every day as he cruised through the same intersections, past the same diners, and waved at the same shopkeepers who never questioned why he drove slow near certain neighborhoods. His shift had just begun. Coffee still hot, radio chatter minimal, and the streets nearly empty except for a few school buses and work trucks. That was when he saw it. A 1970s Cadillac DeVille, polished, immaculate. Deep navy blue with chrome trim and spotless white wall tires. It glided down Ashford Avenue like it had no place to be, and yet belonged everywhere. Ryan's brow furrowed. That wasn't a car you saw often, not in this part of town, and definitely not at this hour. And behind the wheel, a black man. Elderly, wearing a gray fedora and brown driving gloves. He was sitting upright, composed, focused straight ahead. No signs of fumbling or evasion, no sudden moves, just smooth, steady presence. Ryan stared at the Cadillac for another block and finally flicked on the lights. Not because of a violation, there hadn't been one, but something about it didn't sit right. Nice car, calm demeanor, wrong neighborhood. Wrong look. The Cadillac slowed without hesitation, pulling over near a quiet sidewalk shaded by oak trees. Ryan took a breath and stepped out, adjusting his belt like he was preparing for a lecture he'd given a dozen times before. He approached the driver's side. The window rolled down slowly, the hum of the motor barely audible. Inside sat the old man, his hands on the wheel, his chin raised slightly. His skin was the dark, weathered brown of a man who'd lived through decades most people only read about. His eyes, however, were sharper than Ryan expected, quietly assessing. "Morning, sir," Ryan said, in a tone that hovered between civility and suspicion. "You know why I pulled you over?" The old man didn't blink. "No, officer, but I assume you have your reasons." Ryan's jaw tightened. He hated answers like that. Polite but not passive. Measured but unbothered. There was no fear, no confusion, just presence. "Can I see your license and registration?" The man reached into the glove compartment with slow, deliberate movements, retrieving a slim leather wallet and a small envelope with paperwork. No sudden moves, no attitude. He handed them over. "Where are you headed this morning?" Ryan asked. "A burial," the man said plainly. "Family," Ryan prodded. "No," the man said. "History." Ryan blinked. What kind of answer was that? He glanced down at the ID. The name read, Harold Elijah Lawson. The photo matched. The address? Local. Not just local, historic district. Old money side of town. The kind of place you didn't associate with black residents unless they were landscapers or nurses. Ryan stepped back toward his cruiser, his gut twisted. Something didn't add up. No violations, no warrants, no reason. But something in him needed to press further. He keyed into dispatch. "This is Unit 4, requesting verification on a government-issued ID. Name, Harold Elijah Lawson. Can you run a federal database check?" There was a pause, then static. Then another pause. "Say again, Officer Cole." Ryan repeated it. He even spelled the name. A few seconds passed, then 10. No reply. That's when the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Dispatch wasn't slow. Dispatch was confused. As he waited, Ryan stared at the ID again. There was an embossed silver seal in the corner, faint but official-looking. Federal. Below the name, in small print, Judicial Authorization, Article 4. He'd never seen that before. "Where'd you get this ID?" he asked, walking back toward the car. The old man didn't look up. "From the people who appointed me." Ryan tried to hold eye contact, tried to stare him down, but it didn't land. This man wasn't avoiding authority. He simply didn't react to it, like he didn't need to. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle?" Ryan asked, a bit more forceful now. "For what cause?" Harold asked, finally turning toward him. "I have reasonable suspicion." "What suspicion is that?" Harold's voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of courtroom cross-examination. Ryan faltered for a second. "Unusual behavior." "You mean I didn't argue, didn't panic, and didn't look guilty?" Ryan's fingers curled slightly. "Step out of the vehicle," he repeated. This time, Harold complied. He opened the door, his movements fluid but slow. As he stood, he adjusted his jacket slightly, his posture upright and proud. Ryan gestured to the back of the car. "Pop the trunk." Harold paused. "You believe I'm hiding something?" Ryan didn't answer. "I'll open it," Harold said. "But when you find nothing, what will you be looking for next?" Ryan felt the question like a gut punch. He didn't respond. The trunk opened with a soft creak. Inside was a bouquet of white lilies, carefully wrapped in paper. Next to it, a wooden box, polished, with initials carved on the lid. H.E.L. "No contraband," Harold said. "No threat, just memory." Ryan stepped back. The radio crackled to life. "Officer Cole, this is command." A new voice cut in, deeper, more serious than the usual dispatch voice. "Do not proceed further with the stop. Repeat, disengage immediately and return to base." Ryan stared at the radio, stunned. "I'm in the middle of something here." "You're not," the voice replied. "You've just pulled over Chief Justice Harold E. Lawson." "Disengage, now!" Time stopped. The title echoed in Ryan's mind. "Chief Justice." He looked up. Harold stood with his hands calmly folded in front of him. No smirk, no challenge, just watching. Like he had seen this unfold before. "Chief Justice of what?" Ryan asked, his voice barely audible. Harold's eyes didn't flinch. "Of the United States Supreme Court." Ryan's hand dropped from his belt. The silence between them felt like it had weight. Not violent. Not even angry. Just undeniable. Behind them, a car slowed down. A young woman inside raised her phone, filming. "You understand what you've done?" Harold asked. "I didn't know," Ryan said quickly. "That," Harold replied, "is exactly the problem." And with that, he turned, walked back to his car, and closed the trunk with the same care he had opened it. Ryan didn't move. He couldn't. The radio buzzed again. But this time he didn't answer, because deep down, he knew the story had just begun, and it was no longer his to control. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet, staring at his badge like it had transformed into something else. The black coffee in front of him had gone cold hours ago, untouched. His hands, usually so steady, trembled when he reached for the ceramic mug. He couldn't stop replaying it. The calmness, the way Harold Lawson spoke, the way dispatch had snapped to attention the moment his name was said. And most of all, the phrase that stuck in Ryan's chest like a splinter. Chief Justice. It didn't seem real. How could a man like that, someone whose name probably sat in textbooks, just be driving through Ashford like any other citizen? No security detail, No limo, not even a driver. Just a man behind the wheel of a classic Cadillac, wearing driving gloves like it was 1956. Ryan had questions. Too many. But he couldn't ask them. Not now. Not to his lieutenant. Not to his partner. Not to the people online who had already started reposting the video. His name hadn't gone public yet, but he could feel it circling, like blood in the water. By morning, the precinct felt colder than usual. Eyes trailed him, even if no one said anything. A few nods, a few tight-lipped greetings, but it was clear something was off. And then came the call. Lieutenant Donna Hughes summoned him to her office. Donna wasn't known for dramatics. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. But when Ryan stepped in, he could tell she had already made up her mind. "Close the door," she said. Ryan obeyed. She gestured for him to sit, but he didn't. "I assume you know who Harold Lawson is?" she began. "I know now," Ryan replied. Donna tilted her head slightly. "You should have known then." "I didn't recognize him. He wasn't listed under any federal flag in our car system. His ID didn't pop up red." "Because men like that don't need to show up red, Ryan." "They wrote the codes." Ryan felt a heat rise in his chest, but it wasn't anger. It was shame. The kind that starts slow and grows in your gut until it chokes your throat. "I wasn't disrespectful," he insisted. "You questioned him. You told him to step out of the car. You opened his trunk." "I didn't know," Ryan repeated, weaker this time. Donna leaned forward. "That excuse works when you pull over a nervous teenager for rolling a stop sign. It doesn't work when you stop the man who literally helped draft half the decisions that define federal traffic law." Ryan's voice was thin. He wasn't acting like someone important. Donna blinked, slowly, like she was giving him one last chance to catch himself. "Maybe," she said. He was acting exactly like someone who knew his worth didn't depend on being recognized. There was a pause, long and thick. He could have pulled rank. "He didn't," she continued. "He could have made a scene. He stayed calm." "Do you know what that video looks like to people?" Ryan nodded, though he hadn't seen it yet. He couldn't bring himself to watch. Not yet. "It looks like a man being profiled," Donna said. "And not just any man. The man whose name is literally etched into the state courthouse downtown." "I never saw his name," Ryan said. "Not until later. I just saw the car, the gloves." The skin?" she asked. Ryan flinched. Donna didn't press. Instead, she handed him a folder. Inside were 5 printouts, tweets, video links, screenshots of online discussions. Underneath them was a copy of the State Judicial Directory. Highlighted in yellow, Chief Justice Harold Elijah Lawson. "Do you know how long he's served?" she asked. Ryan shook his head. 27 years on the bench, 15 as chief, nominated by 2 presidents. Confirmed unanimously. No scandals, no controversies. Just decisions, fair ones. And yesterday you made him stand beside his car like a suspect. Ryan swallowed hard. "What happens now?" "You're on desk duty for the rest of the week," Donna said. "Internal affairs will need a statement. So will public relations. You need to figure out how to explain this." "What should I say?" "That's up to you," she replied. "But if you say you didn't know who he was, be prepared for the next question. Which is, if he hadn't been the Chief Justice, if he were just another old black man in a nice car, would anything you did have been different?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. Outside her office, the halls were even quieter. No one looked at him. Not directly. It wasn't hostility. It was worse. It was the kind of silence that formed when people didn't know whether to defend you or step away. He sat down at his desk, opened his department laptop, and stared at the login screen. His fingers hovered over the keys, but they didn't move. He wasn't ready to face the video. Across town, Harold Lawson sat in a modest office on the third floor of a red brick building that bore no sign outside. He was leafing through handwritten clemency petitions. He read slowly, carefully, stopping every so often to underline names, dates, phrases that stood out. A clerk knocked lightly on his door. "Judge Lawson," she said. "Someone from the governor's office called. They'd like to release a statement supporting you." Harold didn't look up. "No need. They're worried the silence might make it worse." Harold finally looked at her. "Worse for who?" The clerk hesitated. "For public confidence." Harold nodded once, quietly. "Let them worry about that. Do you want to respond at all?" "To the video?" He shook his head. "The footage speaks. My words won't change it." And with that, he turned back to his paperwork. One of the petitions had a shaky signature. A man sentenced 20 years ago, claiming innocence still. No video. No audience. Just words written in hope. Harold paused for a long moment, then circled the file with a black pen. At that same hour, Ryan finally clicked on the video. It played in a small window in the corner of his screen. There was no commentary, no music. Just grainy footage. A white cop asking an old man to open his trunk. The old man nodding, moving slowly, opening it. The moment the bouquet of lilies came into frame, Ryan felt like the air left the room. He watched himself speak, lips tight, shoulders squared, stance ready. And then Harold's voice, so even, so calm. "If you find nothing, what will you be looking for next?" Ryan paused the video. He didn't need to hear the rest. He already knew the answer. And he already knew how wrong it was. The news didn't break. It detonated. By noon the next day, Judge Harold E. Lawson's name was trending on every major social media platform. The footage of the traffic stop had gone viral overnight, but it wasn't just the video that caught fire. It was the context that followed. Law students began sharing clips of his past lectures. Journalists dug up archival footage of landmark rulings he had authored. A 20-second clip from a 1999 address on judicial ethics, where he said, "Dignity isn't given by law, it's preserved by how we uphold it," played on loop on 3 networks. Ryan sat alone in the corner of the precinct break room, his uniform collar loose, badge off. Every time a phone rang down the hall, he flinched. He could hear murmurs beyond the door, officers talking just loud enough for him to know he was the topic. He wasn't suspended, not officially. But he wasn't welcome either. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Officer Cole," the voice on the line said. "This is Special Agent Natalie Greer with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. We'd like to schedule a time to talk." Ryan swallowed hard. "Am I being investigated?" At this point, it's a review of procedures and conduct. So, yes. There was a pause, then, let's just call it a conversation. "Tomorrow morning." "Federal Building, 9 a.m. Don't be late." The line went dead. That night, Ryan sat in his garage, lights off, car door open. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and humid Georgia dusk. He stared at the old box of awards and commendations tucked beside his tool cabinet. For years, he believed those framed certificates meant something. Now they felt like props from a play he no longer recognized. His wife, Emily, opened the side door and leaned against the frame. "They called me today," she said. "From the school." Ryan looked up. "They're getting questions. Kids are asking if our son's dad is the cop in the video." He didn't answer. Emily's voice cracked, low and tired. They want us to talk to the class. Explain what happened. Maybe reassure them. He rubbed his hands together. What am I supposed to say? That you made a mistake, that you're sorry, that you're human. Ryan looked away. And if I'm not ready to say that? Emily's silence was louder than anything she could have spoken. Then she stepped back inside, letting the screen door slam just hard enough to echo. Across town, in a quiet church basement converted into a legal aid center, Harold sat across from a group of young interns. They were buzzing about the news coverage, energized by the momentum. But Harold wasn't smiling. Do you think we should issue a statement? One intern asked. We could address the public, push for accountability, maybe even policy change. Harold tapped his pen gently on a yellow legal pad. I appreciate your fire, but this isn't about me. But sir, the system. He held up a hand. The system is always watching how we respond when we're wronged. If we shout every time, they learn to expect anger. But if we hold our silence and make them speak first, that's when real change happens. One of the younger clerks, a first-year law student, leaned forward. What if they don't speak? Harold looked at him and said quietly, They already did, the moment they put me on the side of the road. The room fell still. Back at the Federal Building the next morning, Ryan sat across from Agent Greer in a glass-walled interview room. She had the kind of face that made you feel like you were already lying, even if you hadn't spoken yet. Her suit was clean-cut, no nonsense. Her file on the table was thin but carried weight. Tell me what you saw that day, she began. Ryan shifted in his chair. I saw an old car, Cadillac, clean but too polished. Moving slow. Did he break any laws? No. Then why the stop? He hesitated. Something felt off. She raised an eyebrow. Your gut? My instinct. And your instinct told you that a man in a clean car doing nothing wrong needed to be stopped. I know how that sounds, Ryan said. Good, because it sounds exactly like profiling. Ryan felt the walls inch closer. I didn't know who he was. That's not the part that concerns us, officer. It's that if he hadn't been Chief Justice Lawson, this would have ended with another report, another fine, maybe worse, and no one would have known. He leaned forward. I didn't mistreat him. I was professional. Were you respectful? Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, thought back to the moment the judge had stood by his open trunk, white lilies resting inside. The way he had asked, not with fury, but with something heavier. What will you be looking for next? Agent Greer didn't need his answer. She pressed play on a tablet between them. The video played again. Silent, raw, unavoidable. What I see, she said, is a man being forced to prove he's innocent for existing in the wrong neighborhood. That's not law enforcement, officer. That's humiliation. She stood. Internal Affairs will contact you within the week. You're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. Ryan nodded, but it wasn't really agreement. It was the nod of a man who realized he was being pulled out of the current, but had no clue how deep he'd already gone. He walked out into the bright morning light, blinking hard. For a moment, the sunlight didn't feel warm. It felt like exposure. Meanwhile, back at the courthouse, a young mother waited outside the chamber doors with her son. She clutched a copy of the Constitution in one hand and a folded letter in the other. When Harold walked by, she stepped forward. Judge Lawson, she said. He stopped. My brother, she said. He was sentenced 10 years ago. You didn't know him. But he always said, if anyone ever reads my appeal with fairness, it'll be that man. That was you. You saw something no one else did. Harold said nothing, only nodded gently. Then the boy, maybe 10 years old, stepped forward and asked, "Do you remember his name?" Harold looked down at the child, then smiled softly. "I remember what mattered." And with that, he walked away. Because the fight ahead wasn't about clearing his name. It was about reminding people whose names they had ignored all along. The public wasn't just reacting, they were awakening. By midweek, the viral video had evolved into a movement. Hashtags like "Chew Judge Lawson," "Chew Justice Seen," and "Chew Silence Speaks" spread like wildfire. Commentators, legal scholars, and even celebrities had begun weighing in. But it wasn't outrage alone that carried the story. It was reverence. There was something in Harold Lawson's quiet, measured composure that stirred people more deeply than anger ever could. The real spark came from a high school civics class in Newark, where a teacher had paused the day's lesson to show the video. When it ended, a student asked, "If even someone like him can be stopped, what about us?" The clip of that moment, a teacher visibly shaken, a class left speechless, was posted online and hit 1 million views overnight. In Ashford, Ryan sat in the back of his own car, parked in a grocery store lot. The ignition was off. The windows fogged slightly from his breath. He had nowhere else to go that didn't feel like walking into a room full of ghosts. He'd been officially placed on leave. The department phrased it gently, citing routine procedure, but there was nothing routine about it. His access badge had been disabled, his name had been removed from the patrol schedule, and when he'd returned to clear out his locker, someone had taped a copy of the Constitution inside it. No note, just that. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days, not his parents, not his lieutenant, not even Emily. Until the phone rang. It was his father. "Hey," Ryan answered, voice tight. "You okay?" his father asked, the same question he always asked when he didn't know how to say what he really meant. Ryan didn't answer right away. "I saw the video," his father continued. "Yeah, everyone has." There was silence on the line. Then, "I remember him, you know." Ryan's eyes lifted slightly. "Lawson. Back when I was teaching, he came to speak at our school. This was maybe 98. Half the kids didn't even know who he was. But I'll never forget the way he looked at them. Like they mattered. All of them. Even the ones the system had already written off." Ryan let the words settle. "You screwed up," his father said plainly. "I know. But you know what the real problem is?" he continued. "You didn't see him, not the judge, not the black man. You saw a disruption in your routine, and that's the scariest kind of blindness, thinking you're looking when you're really just scanning." Ryan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "I didn't mean harm." "That's not enough anymore," his father said. "Not in this country. Not for you." Then he hung up. Meanwhile, across the city, in a modest church gym converted into a makeshift media hall, Harold sat quietly at the back as a community forum unfolded. He hadn't agreed to speak, only to attend. Organizers had begged him to take the mic, but he preferred to observe. A young woman stood up, trembling slightly. Her voice was uncertain at first, but grew stronger. "My father was pulled over 5 times in 6 months, she said. "Once with me in the car. Every time they told us it was routine, but it didn't feel routine. It felt like being weighed and discarded." She turned toward the back of the room. "When I saw that video, it didn't shock me. What shocked me was that someone finally had a camera when it happened to someone they couldn't dismiss." Harold's gaze remained steady. He didn't nod. He didn't flinch. But his presence shifted the air around her. Afterward, as the crowd milled about, Harold stepped outside for air. That's when a man approached. Mid-30s, tall, uniformed, but not in Ashford colors. Chief Lawson? He asked. Harold didn't correct him. I'm Officer Malik Rhodes. I drove up from Augusta. I just needed to see you. In person. Harold studied him. I watched that video 10 times, Malik continued. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to understand how you stayed that calm. I've had practice, Harold replied. Sir, Malik said, voice cracking, I've been in law enforcement for 9 years. I've stopped people I didn't need to stop. I've let my gut guide me instead of the law, and every time I thought I was being proactive. But now I see I was being reckless. Harold placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. Then don't repeat it, he said. Start seeing people. Not threats, not anomalies, people. Back in Ashford, Ryan drove without a destination. Just roads, stop signs, intersections. Each one whispering echoes of decisions he'd made without thinking. He ended up in front of the courthouse. He didn't plan it. It just happened. The building loomed before him, red brick, towering columns, the American flag fluttering in the wind. He walked up the steps, hesitating at the door. Inside, everything felt sharper, quieter. He asked the clerk, Is Chief Justice Lawson here? The woman behind the counter blinked. Do you have an appointment? No. Then I'm afraid... A voice behind her interrupted. Send him in. She turned. Harold Lawson was standing at the end of the corridor, holding a slim, leather-bound notebook. Ryan followed silently into the chambers. Harold gestured to the seat across from his desk. Sit. Ryan sat. The room was lined with shelves, old law books, photographs. A plaque from the NAACP, a small painting of a courtroom from the 1800s. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, Ryan said. I just needed to understand. Harold opened his notebook, flipped a few pages, then closed it again. Understanding begins when you stop defending your choices, he said. I thought I was being careful. You were being cautious. There's a difference. Ryan's eyes dropped. What would you have done? In my place? Harold leaned forward. I would have asked his name. Ryan exhaled. That's it? That's everything. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was full. Heavy with meaning. You carry a badge, Harold said. That badge gives you power. But what keeps you honorable isn't what you enforce. It's what you choose not to. Ryan nodded slowly. Then Harold stood, extending his hand. Not as a gesture of approval, but of expectation. Start over, he said. Ryan took the hand. And for the first time since the video surfaced, he felt the weight begin to shift, not disappear, but realign, not forgiven, but faced. And that was a start. The storm didn't end after the handshake. It began to widen. 2 days after Ryan met with Chief Justice Harold Lawson, the Ashford Police Department received a formal request from the State Attorney General's office. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but an investigative order, a systemic review of traffic stop data, body cam compliance, and internal bias training protocols. The language was sterile, the meaning was not. Ryan didn't return to the station. He spent his days at home, sifting through headlines, watching clips of protesters standing silently in front of local courthouses. Some carried signs that simply read, "See me." Others held portraits of Harold from his law school years, a reminder that justice hadn't always worn robes. It had once worn borrowed suits and carried second-hand textbooks. But the real tremor hit when a previously buried memo surfaced. A 2021 internal review had flagged Ryan's patrol conduct, noting a pattern of stops disproportionate in race. The recommendation: reassigned to administrative duty pending further observation. It had never been acted upon. The officer who wrote the memo, Lieutenant Parker, had since retired. But now his silence was a headline. The media dubbed it the Ashford Pattern. And now it wasn't just about one officer or one judge. It was about every stop, every unreported interaction, every name left off a citation because it wasn't worth the paperwork. Ryan had become the face of something far bigger than his mistake, and that terrified him. At home, Emily was growing distant, not in the dramatic way, no shouting, no slammed doors, but in the still, empty kind. The kind where you pass each other in the hallway without speaking. The kind where the quiet says more than words ever could. One night she set a cup of coffee beside him and stood for a moment, watching. "Have you talked to Ben?" she asked. Ryan looked up. "Our son?" She nodded. "He won't talk to me." "Can you blame him?" Ryan closed his eyes. "He saw the clip," Emily continued. "Not the long version. The one where you ask him to step out of the car. Where your hand is resting on your holster. I never drew it. That's not what matters." He looked at her, desperate. "I didn't see him for who he was. I know that now. But do you want to know the worst part? I didn't see anyone, not for years. I saw compliance or risk, obedience or resistance, no people. Just shapes." Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. But her next words carved through the air. "And now your son is one of those shapes." That night, Ryan didn't sleep. He walked through the house, pausing outside Ben's door. Light from a tablet leaked beneath the crack. He knocked gently. "Ben, can I come in?" Silence. "Please." The door opened just an inch. Ben stood, arms crossed, eyes swollen but dry. "I don't hate you," he said. Ryan flinched. "I hate that you were so sure you were right." Ryan nodded. "Me too." Ben opened the door a little wider. "You always told me a good man protects the people who can't protect themselves. So why did you make that man prove he didn't need protecting?" Ryan didn't have an answer. So he just sat on the floor beside his son's bed. As the silence stretched between them like a broken bridge, neither of them knew how to rebuild. Across town, Harold Lawson was in Washington, D.C. He hadn't wanted to go. He wasn't interested in being a symbol. But the Judiciary Committee had requested his presence, not as a judge, but as the person involved in the incident. They seated him at a plain table under bright lights. C-SPAN cameras whirred quietly. The senators behind the long dais wore concerned expressions, not performative, but cautious. "Chief Justice Lawson," one senator began, "thank you for being here. We understand this is deeply personal." Harold's voice was even. "It's not personal. It's systemic." The senator cleared his throat. "We're reviewing law enforcement training across jurisdictions, particularly in the South. What would you suggest?" Harold leaned forward slightly. "Change how you define threat. If a man in a suit is assumed to be heading to court, and a man in a hoodie is assumed to be avoiding it, you don't have a training problem. You have a cultural one." Another senator jumped in. "You've served this nation honorably. You've received awards, honorary doctorates, but none of that protected you." "No," Harold said. "Because systems don't check resumes before they act. They operate on perception, and perception doesn't need a fact to feel right." There was a pause. The chair of the committee leaned into his mic. "What would you want people to take from this? Not just officers, but the people watching from home." Harold looked straight into the camera. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who was stopped. I want to be remembered as the man who made others stop themselves." The committee room was silent. Outside, reporters scrambled to relay every line, every syllable. But nothing captured the way the room shifted, not politically, but morally. Because in that moment, the weight of his words didn't rest on the senator's shoulders alone. It slid across the country, into living rooms, squad cars, courthouses, and classrooms. Back in Ashford, a new officer, rookie, barely 24, paused before pulling over a car with tinted windows. He hesitated, then let it pass. Because sometimes, not stopping is the first step to truly seeing. And for the first time in a long time, the system had blinked. Not out of weakness, but reflection, and that was more powerful than any uniform. The temperature in Ashford dropped, but the pressure in the department rose like steam caught beneath a locked lid. Inside the precinct, silence had replaced banter. Every conversation now ended with glances, uneasy, uncertain, sometimes resentful. Officers weren't just talking about the Lawson incident anymore. They were worrying about who'd be next. The Internal Affairs Division had opened an independent audit, and every officer's body cam footage for the past 12 months was under review. A confidential memo leaked to the press confirmed what many feared. Ashford PD had the highest discretionary stop rate in the county, and nearly 72% of those stopped were people of color. It wasn't just one man's bias. It was baked in, and now someone had finally turned on the heat. For Ryan, each day blurred into the next. Officially, he was still employed. Technically. But his reassignment to internal filing felt like exile. No badge, no gun. Just a desk in the corner of a windowless room with stacks of unsorted reports, many of them his own, being refiled under review. The real blow came when an old arrest report crossed his desk. It was from 3 years prior. A 19-year-old named James Holder had been stopped on suspicion of erratic driving. The footage had been inconclusive, and no citation had been issued. But the boy had been detained for nearly 2 hours. Ryan remembered none of it, until he read the final note. Subject visibly shaken. Claimed he was late to pick up his mother from chemotherapy. No confirmation made. He felt the sting in his gut. That evening, he typed James's name into the department's internal system. Nothing, so he turned to public records. After several attempts, he found a local nonprofit's website. James Holder, now a community organizer, listed under Restorative Justice Team. Ryan hesitated. Then he clicked on the contact button. He didn't expect a response, but 3 days later, he received an email. Short, direct. I remember you. If this is for PR, don't waste my time. If this is about accountability, name a time and place. Ryan showed up at the community center 30 minutes early. The building was modest, converted from an old post office. The paint faded, but the windows clean. Inside, laughter and the scent of fresh paint mingled in the air. Kids played chess in one corner. A young woman led a tutoring session nearby. James appeared, clipboard in hand, face calm but unreadable. You came, he said flatly. I wasn't sure I should. You shouldn't have had to think that hard. Ryan nodded, knowing he deserved the jab. They sat across from each other in a side office. Bare walls, one desk. 2 metal chairs. You pulled me over 3 years ago, James said, not a question. Said I looked nervous. Ryan swallowed. I don't remember the details, but I read the report. I was wrong. James folded his arms. My mom passed a month later, he said. That day, I was trying to get her to her last chemo session. She waited outside for almost an hour because I couldn't call her from the back of your car. Ryan looked down. I'm sorry. No, James replied. You're not here for that. You're here because you got caught, not by the public, by yourself. Ryan raised his eyes. Do you think I'm beyond change? James leaned back. No, I think change starts when people stop asking for forgiveness and start asking how to fix what they've broken. There was a long silence. Ryan cleared his throat. Then tell me what to do. James stared at him. Start with your own department. Not the PR stuff. The real rot. The assumptions. The habits. The language. You can't undo what you did to me. But you can make sure the next kid doesn't sit in the back of a cruiser while his mother waits to die. That night, Ryan sat in his car outside the department, writing. Not a memo. Not an apology. A report. He titled it, Discretion and Assumption, a Personal Pattern. It detailed every discretionary stop he could recall. He pulled reports, checked logs, counted citations, broken taillights, vague suspicions. He even included notes about his own language, phrases like seemed off, unusual behavior, didn't respond respectfully. Then, he attached a note. This isn't a resignation. This is a confession. Do with it what you will. He left the envelope in Chief Ellis's inbox before dawn. By noon, it was all anyone at the station was talking about. The reactions were mixed. Some said he'd lost it. Others said it was a stunt. But a few, quietly, called it brave. One of them was Officer Denise Calderon, a 10-year veteran who'd spent most of her time on the community liaison team. She stopped Ryan in the hallway. You started something, she said. I didn't mean to. Well, you did. And now, there are officers asking to review their own footage before it gets audited. They want to know if they missed something, if they need to own something. Ryan shook his head. I don't know if it's enough. Denise looked him straight in the eye. It's not, but it's more than we had last week. That afternoon, the department called a town hall. Chief Ellis stood at the podium. His usual calm was replaced by a noticeable edge. We are not here to defend mistakes, he said. We are here to own them. The room was packed. Officers, citizens, reporters, students. Behind Ellis, a screen lit up. A quote. You can't fix what you won't admit. Beneath it, in small print, Attribution, Officer Ryan Harland, Internal Report, March 10th. Gasps rippled through the room. And somewhere in the crowd, James Holder nodded. Because sometimes change doesn't roar. Sometimes it begins with a whisper from the one who used to make people silent. The night before the ethics hearing, the wind in Ashford carried a strange stillness, like the town itself was holding its breath. Inside a modest conference room at City Hall, the walls were lined with folding chairs and water-stained posters promoting Justice Awareness Month. Normally, this kind of event would have drawn a dozen attendees, maybe a local reporter if someone called ahead. But tonight, every seat was taken. The event wasn't about budget reform or policy updates. It was about the fallout. Ryan Harlan sat in the third row, dressed not in uniform, but a gray button-down and jeans. His hair was slightly longer now, face paler, less tense, as if the weight of pretending to be certain all the time had finally fallen off. But what remained in its place was something heavier. Accountability. Harold Lawson hadn't arrived yet, but his name was already everywhere. The hearing had gone public after the Department of Justice confirmed that Lawson's stop had triggered a wider investigation into racially biased traffic stops across the state. Other departments were now being quietly reviewed. Suddenly, Ashford had become a symbol. Ryan watched as the moderator, a professor from the local college, adjusted his notes and tapped the mic. Tonight isn't about one mistake, the man said. It's about a mirror, and whether we have the courage to look into it." Just as he finished speaking, the back door opened. Harold stepped in. No entourage, no speech in hand. He walked slowly, deliberately, and took a seat in the very last row. No fanfare, no expectation. Ryan saw him, and for a moment didn't move. Then he stood. Without being asked, without introduction, he walked to the front. People shifted, some whispering, others going completely silent. "I'm not here to clear my name," Ryan began. "I'm here because I want to say something out loud, in front of people who deserve to hear it." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "When I pulled over Mr. Lawson, I didn't see a man. I saw a possibility. A possibility that he didn't belong, and I acted on that." Gasps didn't come, just the sound of breathing, thick and hesitant. "I thought I was acting in good faith. I thought my instincts were sharp. But instincts that only sharpen on certain people aren't instincts. They're bias, dressed up in confidence." He looked toward the back, locking eyes with Harold. "I thought this would go away after the apology, after the story moved on. But the truth is, I kept replaying it in my head. Not the stop, but the moment he looked at me like I was the one being judged." A woman in the front row, a teacher, whispered to her neighbor, "This is the first time I've ever heard him speak like this." Ryan continued. "Since that day, I've spoken to other people I've stopped. Not because I had to, because I needed to. And one of them told me something I can't forget. Justice doesn't start with who you accuse. It starts with who you refuse to assume anything about." He stepped back. "I assumed wrong. And if we keep assuming, nothing changes." He returned to his seat. The room didn't applaud. They didn't need to. The moderator turned toward Harold. "Mr. Lawson, would you care to speak?" Harold stood slowly, walked to the front. He didn't touch the mic. He just looked out, his voice steady and quiet. "I've spent a lifetime believing the law could protect people. I wrote statutes, I sat on panels, I saw reform after reform. But none of that stopped a man from seeing me as a suspect because of how I looked in a car I paid for." He scanned the room. "This isn't just about Officer Harland. It's about what made his choice feel normal." The room was still. Then Harold turned to Ryan. "I don't need an apology." Ryan tensed. "I need a partner. One who'll make sure the next generation of officers are trained not just in protocol, but in perspective." Ryan stood up. "I'll do it." And just like that, the tone of the night shifted. The mayor stood. "I propose the formation of a joint task force on community policing, co-chaired by Judge Lawson and Officer Harland." A few murmurs, then claps, not thunderous, but sincere. Afterward, as people began to leave, a teenage girl walked up to Harold and handed him a folded paper. "It's a poem," she said. "I wrote it in school after we watched the video of you." Harold smiled gently and accepted it. As they left the building, Harold caught up to Ryan on the steps. "You meant what you said?" Ryan nodded. "Every word." "Good," Harold replied, "because if we're going to rebuild trust, it won't come from speeches." Ryan smiled faintly. "Then where?" Harold looked at him. "From small rooms like this. From people who were wrong and are willing to stay even when it's uncomfortable." They didn't shake hands this time. They just walked side by side into the quiet Ashford night, toward a town that had finally started to listen. 6 weeks later, a different kind of gathering filled the same city hall room where it all unraveled. Not a hearing, not a disciplinary board. This time, it was standing room only for something no one expected. A community-led initiative called One Stop, One Standard. There were no uniforms at the front, no gavel. Just two men, one gray-haired in a navy sport coat, the other in rolled-up sleeves and worn khakis, sitting beside each other like longtime colleagues. Judge Harold Lawson, once a name hidden behind dusty legal textbooks, had now become something else. Not a martyr, not a hero, but a mirror. And sitting next to him was Ryan Harland, once a symbol of casual enforcement, now a man who'd been through the fire and was still standing. On the stage, a high school student named Brianna took the mic. "I used to think justice was just rules," she said. "But then I watched the video, not the traffic stop, the silence after. The part where no one spoke, but everything changed." She paused, holding up a laminated quote card. It said, "Justice begins not with a badge, but with who you choose to believe deserves dignity." That was the first time I ever saw myself in a sentence. From the back row, someone stood. It was Eric Dubois, the journalist who first uploaded the now viral clip of Harold being stopped. "I didn't post it to get attention," he said. "I posted it because my father used to tell me, if you see something wrong and say nothing, you're part of it. That day, I decided not to be part of it anymore." The crowd clapped, not because it was expected, but because it needed to be done. Not for applause. For release. After the event, reporters tried to corner Harold. "Judge Lawson, any statement about the state-level reforms inspired by your case?" He smiled faintly. "It was never my case. It was everyone's moment to wake up." "Will you ever return to the bench?" "I never left. I've just started sitting in a different seat." Outside the hall, as the crowd began to disperse, a young officer in uniform approached Ryan. "Sir," he said nervously, "can I ask you something?" Ryan nodded. "Of course. That day, if you could go back, would you do it differently?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He looked at the badge pinned to the officer's chest, then back at the kid's eyes. "I wouldn't erase that day," he finally said. "I'd live it better." The officer blinked, unsure what to do with that kind of honesty. Then he extended a hand. "Thanks for not walking away." Ryan shook it. "That's the whole point, isn't it? We only lose when we stop showing up." As twilight deepened over Ashford, Harold returned to his quiet neighborhood, where neighbors now paused to wave, not out of recognition, but respect. He entered his house, set down his briefcase, and pulled a letter from the stack of mail. It was handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single sentence. "I watched you stand still while the world judged you, and I changed how I saw people because of it. Thank you." He folded it gently and placed it beside the others. Not framed, not photographed, just remembered. At the precinct, Chief Ellis finalized a new protocol. Body cams would now be reviewed quarterly, not just for misconduct, but to study how officers engaged with people, with a focus on tone, respect, and restraint. The training manual was rewritten. The first sentence read, "Before enforcing the law, remember, the person in front of you might be the one who wrote it." By week's end, over 100 precincts across the state adopted similar guidelines. The old footage? Still online. Still shared. Still used in classrooms and seminars. But not for shame. For change. And Ryan, he didn't go back to traffic enforcement. He didn't want to. Instead, he began mentoring new cadets. Each time, he opened orientation with the same story. "I once made a stop that changed my entire view of what it meant to serve the law, and it wasn't because I used force. It was because I didn't see the full human in front of me. That'll never happen again. Not on my watch. And if you're wearing this badge, it won't happen on yours either." They listened. Some nodded. Some stayed silent, but none forgot. And that's where this story ends, where it was always meant to. Not in a court ruling, not in a headline, but in the quiet shift of a town learning to see each other fully for the first time. Because justice isn't just delivered in courtrooms, it begins the moment someone chooses not to look away. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Help us tell more stories that deserve to be heard, stories that challenge, that humanize, that matter. Like, share, subscribe, not for us, for the ones who never got the chance to speak until now.